Woman Run. Woman Run is an initiative started by Wright, Lindsay, and Jennings.
Is it on?
After years of working with female entrepreneurs and female inventors, we started realizing there needs to be more groups where we talk and provide the ability to mentor, provide inspiration from women who have done this and succeeded or failed in any capacity, so we can learn and also provide a network so you can talk to each other and get stronger as a community. So thank you for being a part of that. If you've signed in with the sign-in sheet that Mimi's passing around, you will get further invites from us for more events. We have events now monthly up here, or I say up here. I'm in Northwest Arkansas, so I'm very used to up here all the time. We have them here and also in Northwest Arkansas. So if you're up there and you want to check out Women Run up there, please do. We also live stream, as you can tell. So I want to say special thanks to Gina for being here today. We're going to talk a lot about her business, the book, and she is going to be available afterwards with the book outside for sales if anyone wants to talk to her or get her to sign a book. So, let's start. Can everyone hear me okay? Okay, good. So let's talk about Galley Support Innovations. It's a little bit of a different business story because you didn't start the business, you bought the business. So let's talk a little bit about why you made that decision and how that process looked like.
Okay. Well, the honest truth is my husband and I sold a house in Florida at the peak of the market. We doubled what we made on it in 18 months, and we decided that we didn't want to work for anyone else. He'd been in the military, I'd worked for some nonprofit organizations and some government organizations. And so we took that money and we started searching for a business. We looked at everything from Papa John's franchises, which I would probably not sit here looking like this today. We actually looked at a gym, and I would probably still look a lot different than this today. And what ended up happening was we came across a family business that was Galley Support. Well, actually, it was Geometrical Structures at the time. And so we decided to buy that. And when I say we, ladies, I want to be very honest, and my husband is in the room. I said, this is a horrible idea. Don't buy this business. It's in debt. I mean, the person who tried to sell it to us said, oh, we have $500,000 in tax debt and we'll never pay taxes. I'm like, I don't think that's how business is supposed to work. So at all of 25 years old, I made the suggestion, I'll say, not the decision, the suggestion that we buy the assets. So we did an asset purchase of the business, and I strongly believe unless the business has just an amazing sales record and is doing really, really well, that's the best way to do is an asset purchase. So we purchased the assets, the right to produce, the right, intellectual property, and then we brought it from California to Arkansas. So what was really hard about that is it wasn't just starting a business, it was running a business, learning how to run a business, and starting a business. Because we had zero manufacturing experience. My husband had an industrial engineering degree, however, he'd gotten that in the military so he could be a pilot. And turns out that he was colorblind, and he was color deficient. So, not colorblind, color deficient. So he was not going to be able to be a pilot, and so we decided to get out and buy a business. And that's sort of how we got to where we are, and we literally learned how to run our business on Google and YouTube, and lots of prayer, and making it happen. And so that was actually our tagline. It still is our tagline forever, was we make it happen, because we didn't have any other option. We bought it. One of the family members was supposed to come out and help run it, and he actually ended up going to prison for manufacturing, not aircraft parts. So we were, I said we're going to be truthful. So we had no option except to figure out how to run this business on our own. And we moved to California for 6 weeks. The family member said, hey, this is, sort of how I do it. And we took the good and, from him and maybe got rid of some of the stuff that we didn't think was such a good idea and went from there.
This is fascinating because the asset purchase part, I've had clients do this. Did you have someone telling you, or was this a 25-year-old just
Yeah.
I'm making this decision.
I always thought it was all God. I mean, I was just like, when we just started talking, I had no idea. I had very little business experience. I'd had a small marketing company, promotions company before that. And I just, it was one of those things that turned out that I just ended up being good at business. My husband's an amazing designer, and he's good at that, and I ended up just being good at business. And, I guess I should have recognized it then when I was like, we should do an asset purchase. I mean, I didn't even know it was called an asset purchase. What I said was, we should just buy the machines and the right to produce all this stuff and start our own company. And years later, I found out it was called an asset purchase. And so that's just one of those things that I just sort of have a natural ability for business.
There's so much, I mean, we could do a whole session just on that. So, one of the things that I love that you do is you're involved in a lot of different organizations. And some of them have been clearly, they benefit the business.
Mm-hmm.
But also knowing some of those organizations, you're gonna have to tell everyone all those things you do. But I know those aren't ones that you can just walk into. You can't just call up the governor and say, hey, I went on this board. But how did you get on those boards?
I talk a lot. Honestly, people, they'll say, I've been called a bulldog, and I say, I'm not a bulldog, I'm like a chihuahua. I'm just annoying, and I just don't quit. Like, I'm not the one that goes in and throws a chair across the room and says, everybody's gonna listen to me, and that's the deal. I just am constant in what I believe, and I have a firm belief in economic development. I truly believe that a rising tide lifts all boats, and when I say a rising tide, what I mean is the actual tide is our underemployed and unemployed people. And if we employ those people and we provide jobs for those people, that it changes everything. It changes how we spend our tax dollars. I tell everybody I'm very fiscally conservative, and what I say is I don't want my tax dollars going towards prisons. I want it going towards sidewalks and schools. And I know that people who have jobs are less likely to end up in prison. And so that's where my passion, honestly, for economic development comes from. It's really more of community development. And I truly believe that if you mentor at a young age, if you're reaching out to the unemployed and the underemployed in those communities where that's prominent, that makes a difference in your overall state, it makes a difference in your overall economy. And then for truly selfish reasons on top of that is I want Boeing in my backyard, because if Boeing's in my backyard, they're more likely to do business with me. And so I always tell everybody, like I tell the governor when we go, and I'll do international trade missions, and we go to the Farnborough Air Show, and I say, listen, there is no better person to advocate for a company moving to your state than business owners within your state. And we want that more than the economic developer wants it, because they may get I don't know if they get commission checks, I don't know how that works honestly, but they may get a little something from it, but we get a lifetime customer. And so it's very important to me, because I look at everyone that works for us as, and I always say part of my family, but some family members you don't really want to own, or you don't want to say, hey, that's part of my family, but we're a team. And when I make decisions for my company, from the state, for anything, I look at how that's going to affect them. I've got multitudes of mouths to feed, because the number of employees I have, multiplied by their family members. I mean, that's important to me, and so I just try to hit it from every angle that I can. And now, I am an international trade advisor to Congress, and that one actually came across really kind of awkwardly, or not awkwardly, just weirdly. Someone wrote an article about me in an international business magazine and called me one of 5 women to watch in international business, I think maybe 2014. And I've been doing international business, and it wasn't, I didn't think anything about it. I didn't do it to get, my name in a magazine or anything. And then they called and said, hey, would you be willing to serve on the International Trade Advisory Committee for small minority businesses? And I was like, well, what does that mean? And they said, well, basically it means you're going to spend a whole lot of money on your own and come to DC 4 times a year, and, you're going to have, hundreds and hundreds of papers, to go through, because what I do in that role is the trade negotiators actually, like, we'll say the U.S. and Brazil. They go back and forth and they do the negotiations. They write it down, they give us the text, and then we go through it and we say, this is either good for small and minority businesses, or this is not good for small and minority businesses. We need to add this in here. Are there incentives for developing countries? these type of things, and we put that into the text. So women and minorities and small businesses who are starting their business actually have an opportunity to work on the international level, and not just through Pinterest or eBay, or to actually grow themselves, as opposed to in the past, it's all been large companies who, they have the money they've got someone that just works on international trade, they fly them over there and they work with the tax negotiators, and so this is something, there's actually 9 committees. There's like agriculture and aerospace and several others, and then small and minority businesses, the one that I sit on. And I do that because it makes me an expert to my customers. I've had customers call me and say, hey, we're really struggling with this, do you have any say in that? I'm like, no, I really don't, probably. I can say whatever I want, but whether the politicians are gonna listen to me or not is something different. But it makes me that expert on international trade, and working in aerospace, it's almost 99% international. So that makes me valuable to my customers. So that's why I've done that, is to help my customers, which of course, I help my customers, it's good customer service, they buy from me.
Also makes me think, because there are a lot of women in this group that would be interested in doing international trade.
Yeah.
And so, in your role, is that something where those women could talk to you and maybe open the door?
It is, and actually what I did this past September was I organized, which I learned I'm not an event organizer. If there are event organizers out here, my hat's off to you, not my thing. But I organized the EU, which is the European Union, US, Small, Medium, Minority Enterprise Workshop. And so what that did was it brought companies and government officials from the EU actually into Arkansas. We hosted it at the Innovation Hub in North Little Rock, and we had a 2-day conference on how to do business with each other. Barriers to trade in the EU, barriers to trade in the US, things that small business owners and medium-sized business owners need to be aware of when they move forward, cultural things. And so that was the whole point of that, was to bring businesses here together with businesses and government agencies over there to connect them to do international trade.
So, we've talked a little bit about the aerospace industry. You are in a very male-dominated field, and you're also on committees that I'm going to guess are fairly male-dominated. Then at a conference I was at recently, there was a big question on, in those situations, how do you make sure your voice is heard, and how do you make sure you're giving credit for the ideas that come out of your mouth, rather than the guy next to you saying, oh, I'm gonna say just what Gina just said, and get all the accolades.
Yeah. I actually write about that in my book. It's my version of mansplaining, and that's not when, and I call this version of when the men explain it to the other men in the room, and all of a sudden they're like, oh, that's a great idea. And so there's a couple of things, and one of the exciting things is I actually had a couple gentlemen who are here today, and I thank you guys for being here, and they said, will I be the only man in the room? And I said, that's how women feel 99% of the time when we go to work. So one, there's already that intimidation factor, and I've been in a male-dominated field for so long now that when I walk in and see a woman in the room, I'm like, oh, hey, there's another woman, look at my sister, And so, but you walk in and you look around and you think, am I going to be the only woman in this room? And if you're a person of color, same thing, you look around and you think, am I the only person of color in this room? And so there's already that I'm outnumbered in intimidation factor. Not by anything necessarily the men are doing, but just by the fact that there's more of them than there are of you in the room. So we have to know that that's an issue, and then we have to go, okay, I'm not going to let that be an issue. I'm aware of that, and I'm not going to let that be an issue. And then one of the other things I really recommend is making male allies. And I talk about this at great lengths in my book. As a matter of fact, it's one of the things I speak on probably more than anything. And that is finding a man who, one, making them aware. Saying, asking them, say, hey, when I'm in this meeting, and I say something, do you notice, do the other men respond? Are you even going to say the other men, especially if you're the only woman in the room, say, do the other committee members respond to me? Or does it seem to you that someone is repeating what I say, and then they're responding to that person? And just making them aware, say, will you be my extra set of eyes for this? Will you be my extra set of ears for this? Will you just watch? And you would be amazed, when they see it, they call it out. and they'll say, oh, wait a minute, Gina just said this. That's what Gina just said. And so that is really helpful if you can find a guy that you can do that with. And again, I'm not, buy the book. There's lots of information about that. I always get in trouble because Amy says I always speak and then forget to tell people I even wrote a book. But there's lots of information about that in there. But another little tip is I've learned that when someone says, one time I was in a meeting and I said, we need to do, use this program that's already in place instead of starting something new. Sounded just like that. Crickets. Nothing. And then a gentleman commissioner said, has anyone heard of this program? What if we just use that? And I remember I was so mad, and I write a lot about it in the book. Yes. I talk about my definite need for Jesus in that because I was very, very upset about it. But then I learned when I would go back, I would go, oh, thank you, Commissioner Smith. That's exactly what I was speaking of. And the first time I did it, I remember he was like, I've never heard her speak in this committee before, and I am very vocal in every committee. But he literally, it was like his eyes, he just thought, oh my gosh, I never heard her say anything. And so I would say, thank you. I'm trying to not use real names. That is one thing about the book is there's a lot, I don't think anyone's husband is in the book. But there's a lot of local people in the book. But I'm trying to think of another name, Mr. Jones. No, I know Mr. Jones actually. It's not your husband, don't worry. That's just an easy name. Yeah, but and then I would go, oh, that's exactly what I was saying, Mr. Jones, thank you. And pointing that out, and not rude, just making them aware. And then, after that, I never will forget the first time someone said, I said something, it was like the next time this had happened, and someone said, I agree with Commissioner Radke, and I was like, yay. Because it was literally like they had opened their eyes and ears that I was in the room. And so just pointing that out and not saying, did I just say that? Did you not hear me just say that? Sometimes I know we can get to that point, where we're like, listen, buddy. But for the most part, just saying, yeah, thank you, sir. That's exactly what I just said. And that's one of the tips that I would give that has just, changed everything in board meetings for me.
So last week in Northwest, we had a session on diversity NWA. It's being run by 4C Collective, and the discussion was focused primarily on diversity and inclusion. And we talked about bringing in more people. And one thing I love that you do is when you're one of the few women in the room, you make sure that there are other women that come in behind you. And that's not always an easy thing to do. Have you had pushback when you do that at all?
Well, obviously I run my own company, so nobody's going to push back against me there. My husband sometimes, but I usually do pretty good at those arguments. But in other ones I have, I've had men just say, well, if we get two women, in this committee, they'll probably be bickering. And okay. And ladies, that's our fault. We're going to have to watch that. You cannot say to a man, oh, I don't have female friends, because they backbite and they gossip. She's a bitch, I don't like her, because that does not make you one of the boys. That isolates all the other women, that pushes them all out. And men think, well, we can't have two of them in the room because they'll act like that. We're good with one. We have our one and we're good. And so I have had a tiny bit of pushback, but I think that for the most part, I do honestly believe 99.9% of men are not sexist monsters. They're just unaware. And so as we make them more aware, as we as women make them more aware, as aware men make them more aware, it changes. Our culture changes.
And I agree with that. I think my field of patent law, it's so male-dominated. Work with tech. That was always my big thing, pulling more women into that room, more women of color into the room, because our numbers are low. We need those voices. We need more people to see us in these roles, to see roles like yours that emulate, so we can have our daughters emulate us. So your company is, like you said, a big family. One thing I love watching on social media is the culture of the company. And clearly you've built that from the ground up. You didn't have employees from California over. How do you keep that culture going? How do you instill it in so well?
Well, we sort of believe in the 80-20 rule. We spend 80% of our time with our top 20% of management, and we really encourage them to move that culture down. And we have monthly luncheons where, it's sort of a GSI family luncheon, and everybody brings something, and we get together and have lunch. And we will have some person, usually, we try to do different people, but some person will share part of their life story. You can call it their testimony. We'll share some good information. And so we try to keep that family atmosphere in the sense that you spend more waking hours with the people you work with than anyone else. And so we want that to be a positive attitude, a positive place. And that's one thing I always say, we will hire and fire for attitude. If you have a negative attitude, we had an employee who was an amazing employee in the sense that they hardly ever made any mistakes. However, the attitude was so poisonous. They were negative. People hated to go into this person's department because they were so negative. And we lost good people. And I remember one time on this guy called me out on an exit interview. He says, Gina says she'll hire and fire for attitude, and that goes for everybody except this employee. And the problem is they were one of our first employees that actually did come from California. We had 2 that came from California with us. So I felt this sense of loyalty to them, yet they didn't feel a sense of loyalty to our organization and to make it a good place. And so we finally had to let him go. And I brought him into my office and I said, because I told him, I strongly believe that if it's a surprise, if someone is surprised that they're getting fired, then you have not trained them well, you've not loved them well, you have not warned them. You've not done everything you can to get them on the right path. And so I brought that person to my office and I said, do you remember the last time that we had this discussion? Or what I said was, do you remember I told you if I had any more complaints about your attitude again, that we were going to let you go? And their response was, well, you finally fired all the idiots. And I said, we're letting you go. So they knew. The joke around our office is bring a box. Do you have your box ready? And it's not to threaten people or to have a culture of fear. It's if there is an issue that has repeatedly happened, we want you to know if you do this again, you will be let go. This poisons our culture and we will not stand for that. And so people know, they're like, they kind of joke, should I bring my box into the meeting? And we very rarely have to do that because, you tell someone over and over, this is what it is, and they either get it and they get good or they get gone. And that's sort of, and I've literally had a list up on an expo board in my office, and I erased it before anybody else came in, and I said, these are the 5 people that are going to have to get good or get gone, and we're going to have to help them get good or get gone. And I've literally prayed for other people to get better jobs. I'm like, maybe you can go work for someone else, and so that's how I fired people. I prayed for you to get a better job. But they are very aware when they are let go that, we've tried you on different seats on the bus, we've talked to you, we have a communications coach who comes in and works with our team. We try everything that we can to keep, people there because good people are hard to find. Especially the economy, the way it is right now, the unemployment rate is so low. So we really try to keep good people, but we're not going to allow someone to poison our culture. And that's just it. And that is, they always say women are emotional, which I have to say, ladies and men, anger is an emotion. Just because men get angry and women may cry does not mean that one is an emotion and one is not. Anger is an emotion. But I will, kind of the joke at my company is that's the one thing I'll get emotional about. We had someone make some racist comments and we he didn't even have to bring a box. That was just the end of it. And I stood on the stage and I talked to everybody and they were like, oh mercy. Because I was like, we will not stand for that. And they were like, oh Lord, she's going to start cussing. It's going to be bad. But our culture is so important because you don't lose people because you have a bad product or bad processes. You lose people because you have a bad culture.
So balance comes up in the book. And it's also something a lot of times comes up with groups of women. I have historically hated it. I know Sarah and Jensen both have heard my rants about the balance question. And I am coming around to it a little bit because I've heard recently it's not the question of how do you get that balance? The question is, how do I do what you're doing because I want to succeed as well? And so I'm trying to make peace with balance. I want to know your thoughts on balance. I'm sure the book tells us, but
Yeah, it does. Well, and when we think balance, we think of scales. You have to put something on to be balanced. You take something off here, and you try to get that balance in between. And I do believe that is true. In the book, I talk about how I found balance was I quit. I quit doing things I didn't want to do. I quit doing things that others could do for themselves, and I quit doing things others could do for me. It's simple, but the book will tell you more. But that's what I just quit. I was like, no, I don't want to be in the PTA. I'm not going to be in the PTA. And I do think PTA is extremely, extremely important. But it's good for some people. I did one time. I volunteered to be the lady that led the space camp trip, and I could not stand any of those women by the time we were done, me and none of them, because nobody volunteered. And as soon as I volunteered, literally, they were like, "Well, why didn't you do that?" I'm like, "I just volunteered 16 seconds ago, and you saw me. You know that. Why didn't you volunteer? Don't get mad at me because I didn't do something when I just volunteered." But I did that because I wanted my son to go to space camp. I wanted myself to go to space camp. I'm not gonna lie, that's the total truth. I switched schools in 5th grade and didn't get to go to space camp, so my son was going to space camp in 5th grade. After that, I learned not to do it. I was just like, this is not my thing. I don't want to organize things like this. It's just not what I want to do. And so I quit doing things like that. And I think that's the biggest thing for me, is quit doing things that you think you should be doing. We talked about, I think, you and I talked a little bit about comparing ourselves to others, and how used to we just only had to compare ourselves to the other moms in the carpool line, or our neighbors, or women at work, whatever. And now we get to compare ourselves to everybody across the world, thanks to social media. So I have a strong belief that if you see something on social media that makes you have a negative feeling towards yourself, or whatever feeling, delete it. You can always add them later, and you can go, you know what, Facebook's weird, sorry, didn't mean to delete you. And it is true, sometimes, I don't know if it's in this room, but that actually did happen, and I was like, are you mad at me? Why'd you delete, she's like, I thought we were friends. I was like, I thought we were too, So Facebook does have an unfollow button, so you can unfollow without unfriending them, and you don't have to refriend them and go through that awkward stage. But if you see something that is making you feel less than, then get rid of it. Remove it from your life, because it's false, it's lies. Because the truth is you are way more than you. That's what, more than is, the original title was going to be Business Bitch. Because I got called, in the first chapter I talk about a guy calling me a bitch in an email. And so I was like, I'm going to call it Business Bitch. And then I was like, my Nana will never be able to hold this book. But, the truth is we're more than business bitches. We're more than moms. We're more than wives. We're more than friends. We are so many different things. And just like men are the same way, so many different things at once. And so we need to stop trying to be everything. You can be more than, but you can't be everything. And I really think that that's the biggest thing, is get rid of things that you don't want to do. And we talk about balance, and it's not, the reason that we started late was because many women said, I have to drop my kids off at school and then I'm going to be there. That's not about balance. That's not about comparing yourself to someone else. That's about, you had to drop your kids off at school. However it works in your family is, whatever. I'm not going to say, it's bad or good or whatever. My husband and I made a deal pretty early on. I realized that he enjoyed taking the kids to school. So he took them to school, and then I picked them up. And then a lot of times he'd pick them up, because I would be late to pick them up, and he didn't like for me, he didn't want the kids to be late, and I was like, it doesn't bother me, so they know I'm coming. I would always say, our kids are social, they'll talk, it'll be fine. And so if he didn't like it, then he went and did it, because that was his thing. And that bothered him and not me. And so that's the thing, is if it doesn't, cleaning the house, another, in marriage, my husband thinks that if you make the bed, that makes the whole room. And he's right, it does make a big difference. I personally think that if you pick your clothes up and off the floor and put them in the hamper right next to the clothes that are on the floor, that makes the whole room. So he makes the bed, and I pick the clothes off and put them in the hamper, And so it's really, it's really what is important to you? What bothers you? And quit trying to do everything if it's not important. Ask yourself, is this important to me? And learn to say no. and say,
Yes.
no, that it's not
Yes.
important,
It's a big-
So,
See, we're opposite. I don't make the beds, but I will open the window, the blinds. And that drives my husband crazy because it's like everyone can see the unmade bed. It's my backyard, so no, they can't. Okay, so more than, you have a book.
That's
And
it,
it's
yeah.
doing
And I talked about it.
amazingly.
It is. It's in its third printing. It actually sold out. So what happened was this was my first book, and I got really excited when they said, "Oh, your book's up on Amazon." I didn't know that they put it on Amazon months and months before it came out. So I posted on my social media, and God bless my girlfriends in Arkansas and close surrounding states. They went and bought it. It sold out before it was even time to get the books. And so we had to do another reprint. We had to reopen it, and then I ended up talking to. So Ingram is the largest book distributor in the world, and they actually picked me up for distribution. So it's available on Barnes and Noble and Target and Amazon and all those places. Yeah, I know, right? And the good news is that you can't find it at any of those places because it's sold out. But you can go to the .com and they get it quicker. And Amazon.com, Target.com, BarnesandNoble.com, all those .coms. And so I actually ended up talking to my publisher and to Ingram, and I said, listen, here's the deal. I said, I am not Michelle Obama. Nobody's going to wait 5 months for my book. Is there any way possible that we can move up the publishing date? And they were like, we don't do that. And I was like, okay, so I'm going to call you tomorrow at 9 o'clock. Remember the Chihuahua story, right? And so I just kept after it. And finally, this first-time author, machine operator, manufacturing company owner, mom, got them to release the book early. So they released it in November as opposed to in January because they wanted to do a January 1/1 release date of, new year, new you, that kind of thing. So they released it in November. It's sold out. And then we had to just we did another printing, and we just got the books in last week. I mean, it was, So it was really exciting. It is done really well. And I think the reason, when I wrote it, I didn't know how it would do. I really didn't write it to be a famous author, because I'm going to be really honest. If everybody who wants to write a book, you're not going to make a bunch of money writing a book. I mean, that's just sort of the truth. They don't give you a big check anymore and say, oh, look at you, you're awesome. And you got to sell a whole lot of $15 books to, replace your income. And so I knew that wasn't, going to be the thing. I wasn't going to go and be, that was not my thought. I wasn't going to sell out into any of those things. What I thought was I did not have a female mentor coming up. And I searched for one, and I looked for one, and I asked men to be, my mentors. And I had some that have been great mentors to me. I had one that said, that's great, we'll have dinner at 6 o'clock at, Cash. And I was like, me and you and your wife? I mean, and so there was, it's hard sometimes, and it was just really hard for me. And I saw myself I do a lot of mentoring with startups, and I saw myself giving the same advice over and over. And then as I started to write the book, it wasn't going to be a book for women. It was just going to be a entrepreneurial book. This is what I learned in my time in business. But I started going, but if you're a woman, you may have trouble getting capital. If you're a woman, you may have to deal with this. And so finally, thanks to my husband, he said, just write a book for women. He said, and then, then write the next one. And I think that it's a void in the market that we need that mentor. We need that person that is 10 to 15 years ahead of us in our career saying, this is the things that I dealt with and, what you can do. And one of the best compliments I got was a woman read it, and she said, it's like having a long coffee with a woman who's 10 years ahead of you in your career. It's just that I just wrote it. I don't try to speak over anybody's head. There's not a bunch of research, and it's just like, this is what's up. And what's funny is it took me 6 months to write the book. And literally in that 6 months, almost every story happened. I mean, I didn't have to pull from long, the bitch story happened way before the 6 months, but almost every other story happened within that 6 months. And it's like, this is just our lives. This is just what we're dealing with. And so a friend actually told me, she's mansplained, she said, that has been happening to me for 30 years in my career, and I had no idea what it was. I didn't know how to deal with it. I knew it frustrated me, and I couldn't put a name to it. And so I just think it was needed. And I'm very real and I'm very honest about imposter syndrome and, how I suffer from that and how I overcome that. Talk about standing in the bathroom in the superwoman position before I had to go speak on stage on a national event. And, I just think women need that, you know. We see on Instagram all these business quotes, and you see a woman in, 6-inch high heels getting out of a Lamborghini, and you're like, I don't live like that. I've never seen that. And so I just felt like we needed a real woman to say, this is what's up, this is what I'm dealing with, and these are ways that I have found that help me, have helped me be successful, and have helped me deal with the things that we deal with.
So we have a little bit of time for questions.
I just like to make a comment, and I think I'm among a few people in this room that are in their 60s. And to hear this conversation today, I wish I had it in the 70s and 80s. And it just almost brings tears to my eyes. I could not be more proud of you, Gina and Meredith, and all of you in this room. And I had kind of a double hit working in television, in news, in several states. And anyways, a kind of double hit in your looks and all that. And if I could say anything, whatever you feel like, if you feel good, wear it or don't wear it. Please be yourself. And one of the things, did you ever get a question of, oh, Gina, you need to take the emotion out of your voice? And you mentioned the anger is an emotion and crying's an emotion. And I don't know if you all ever saw broadcast news where Holly Hunter begins the show and she just starts bawling before she goes and does her job because it's so weird. And that is kind of a weird deal. But, sometimes I felt like that. To have this movement, right now I just could not be more proud of all of you in the room. And I wish I had that. And I think I have a lot to give, and I'm trying to do that. But just between the internet and just this change, I think the world's in a much better place. And I think your book sounds awesome. I'm going to buy one. But back to the emotion, is anyone still getting when you're in a meeting or something? I'm not now. I'll have to make sure I mention that. But just back in the day, you felt like you couldn't say anything without being yourself, but then getting attacked for, well, you just have too much emotion in your voice. And you're just like, dang it, I want this done, and this is not right, and why can't you see that, and that kind of thing.
Now, there's a story of a woman in the book who was told that she could not be a part of something because she was too emotional about the situation. And she'd written an email.
Yes.
So there was no, and it was one of those tribe emails where we all read it and said, nope, you sound very illogical. You said, there's no emotion.
Yes.
I tend to be almost emotionless sometimes because I'm like, facts. Here's some more facts, and here's some more facts. And so that works out well for me. I've never been told, and I'll just be really honest, I think men are so much more aware now that they would be kind of terrified to say, you're getting emotional about this, or, let's just be honest. And so I've heard it behind closed doors, though. I have heard people say, and that's the issue, and to the men in the room, I want to say, one, thank you for being here, but two, when we don't need you to stand up here and say women are awesome. When you are in that room alone with men and they say this woman is too emotional, or we can't hire this woman because what if she gets pregnant and is gone for 6 to 12 weeks? You guys have amazing maternity leave. We need you to say, yeah, well, what if John Smith breaks his Rotary cup and is out for 6 weeks? That's where we need you guys to stand up for us and say, that should not be a factor on the table. And so I have not personally had anyone say that I need to take emotion out of mine. Maybe they were scared of me just because my emotion is pretty fierce. I tell people all the time. One time I had a conversation with French Hill, who I actually love now. We were on the opposite sides of something, and I came in, I said, listen, I said, I will not apologize for my passion. I will apologize that you got 5 minutes to hear everything I got to say. And I'm like, boom, here it is, and that's the truth. It's like, listen, I'm not going to apologize for my passion. I'm passionate.
And that's where I think it gets mixed up. You're passionate and you see things are not right, and so back over the years, just try to take a deep breath, be the superwoman and all that. But when you see it's just still just like, oh, this isn't right. But it's hard.
I've gotten it a lot about the passion or emotion, and I switch it to saying, yes, I am too passionate. I am always going to be too passionate.
And what's wrong with? There's nothing wrong with that. Don't stop.
So as a young Arkansan woman, I started an accountant job. I think I was 21. And dealt with a lot of issues in terms of it being a boys' club. And so with this current women's movement that we're seeing, in business and politics, and now that I'm raising 2 young daughters, I would be interested in your thoughts as to how we prepare women who are, you know, leaving college and going into business, and how they deal with like potential boys clubs without coming across as bitchy, right? Do you have any thoughts on that?
I do. Talk about it in the book. You guys don't know. I'm going to get a treat when I leave here. Amy's so proud of me for how much I mentioned the book. There's Amy, and she's in the book, and she's amazing. But I do, and one of the things I say is asked to be a part of it. You know, I was the president, and this story's in the book, I was a president of an organization, and we were traveling for a committee meeting. I don't know if it was an annual meeting, what it was. And the next day I get there and I find out that all the guys have gone and they've played golf. And I was the president, the only female on the board, and the president, and they had made decisions on that golf course. And so I was like, well, wait a minute. And so I sent a letter the next time, and I just, you know, I thought about it too, because I had a wonderful night doing nothing in the hotel room before, and I was like, oh, this is nice. And, you know, would I have gone, and I understand, guys need to go and do guy things, girls, we want to have our tribe do girl things, but I was like, this isn't a group of friends getting together, these are businessmen. So I sent a message to the entire board, and I said, hey, next board meeting, if you guys get together, I would like to go with you. And we did, and we all went to a microbrewery and, you know, did whatever. And so just saying, I want to be a part of that, makes a big difference, you know. And there are things you may have to, if you don't already play golf, learn to play golf, or, you know, whatever. But actually, Amy Rickman, who I write about her in the book, was one of the first females at Pfizer, and she made it to an executive position. And she said, never spend the day at the spa when your boss and all your coworkers are on the golf course. Mm-hmm. And I was like, man, but I love the spa. But it's true. I mean, it's really, really true. And so what I say is you just invite yourself. Say, I want to be a part of this. You know, and again, like I said, 99.9% of men are not sexist monsters. They're not going to say, no girls allowed. They're going to go, oh, okay, well, you know, what time can you be there? So I have not once been turned down when I said I want to be a part of this. Not one time has a guy, I mean, my husband sometimes says, can I have some time with the guys, please, just me, you know, but not in a professional setting. I have never been turned down when I've asked to be part of the boys club, basically.
And might I add, you said you had young daughters?
2, yeah.
I don't know how old they are. I have a daughter who's 18. And for the last several years, I take her with me when I speak at business engagements. I travel her once or twice a year to see what I do professionally, and I think you do the same thing. I've traveled my son. I have a young woman who works for me as an administrative assistant. She's in college, about to start graduate school. I take her with me to executive meetings, so, I mean, not if something confidential is going to be discussed, but so that she can see what we do. I mean, we have lots of women intern with us, but to get to have those experiences, to really be there in those meetings, in those moments, and hear you and see you, that's such a great experience.
As a matter of fact, 2 of our leadership are in the back right now that are from our company.
Well, I just thought maybe you might comment on that, because I have sensed from things I've just watched you on social media that your trajectory wasn't always a straight line up.
Oh, no.
And we look at, and I love all the things you do now, but there had to be, you know, there's a lot of talk right now about grit, and Ms. Duckworth has got her book and her research out there, and somewhere you definitely found the grit to persevere to get where you are. And I think that's when we're going to speak about younger women especially. What do you do in that moment when you're like, dear Lord, this is a lot?
Yeah. You have options. You can go in the bathroom and have a good cry, and then you can suck it up and move on. And, you know, first of all, you know, you've always heard that thing, so are you going to cry about it or are you going to do something about it? And it's like, first of all, I'm going to do both. I'm going to go to the bathroom and have a good cry, and then I'm going to suck it up. You know, I mean, and here's the truth is, we opened our company in 2005, and then the economy crashed, and we're selling parts to luxury aircraft. You know, so it was tough. My husband actually went, what we did was we both put our resumes out, and whoever got a job first would get a job. And we did that with our kids. My husband was actually a stay-at-home dad for a whole 2 weeks, and then he called me at work and said I quit. You know, and so we've always, I have a great partner, and so I don't ever want to deny that. But when he went to work somewhere else, I mean, it was me. And I was working with two men, and it's funny, just to give you, we hire a lot of people who have felonies or have been in prison, and most of them you wouldn't even know. These guys look like the guy, they're just big Indian guys with tattoos, and and here I am, little Southern blonde going, okay, this is a better process, and they're like, what, lady, and so I had to just dig in and find that grit. And I think women more often than men start businesses not because we want to, but because we have to. It's so I always say that BITCH stands for beautiful, intelligent, talented, creative, and hardworking. And we get creative when we're pressed. That's when we find that grit, and we're hardworking. And so you just kind of have to find it within you because you don't have any other options. And so, I wish I had like a magic formula to how to find the grit, but the truth is sometimes when your back's against the wall, you find it because you don't have any other options.
I appreciate that. I went and pulled one of our employees out of jail one night on his second felony. And I said, I need him back on shift tomorrow, whether I put him on.
Okay, one more.
More questions here.
So I'm the president of a female nonprofit, and one of the biggest feedback we get is that self-promotion is really hard for them. They don't know how to even nominate themselves for leadership positions and how to take the lead. And so what is your recommendation of how to do it eloquently, smoothly, whatever the right word is? Because women have a hard time, we know this, I have a lot of women in my organization sitting in this room, and we have a hard time of getting them to feel comfortable to make that recommendation to say, I want to run for president, or I want to be in a leadership position. Do you have any recommendation to women who are dealing with that as well?
I do. I have a lot, and most of them are in the book. But one of the things I would say is you need to recognize that it's imposter syndrome. You only think that you're not good enough. The truth is, if you put your resume next to someone else's resume, it probably, I'm not going to say it's probably better, but it's likely better. It's all in your head. And so you need to recognize that first, because once you recognize that, you can move forward and you can get over that. And you can say, here's the deal. I have worked hard, I have done this, and I can move forward. And also find a mentor, find a sponsor, find a male ally, find a tribe of both men and women who will encourage you, but also speak for you and say, they're good at this. I have a tribe of women who, if I do something on social media, sometimes it's stuff that I don't even know, or out whatever, they will post on social media about my accomplishments because I do it for them. That's just what we do. And there'll be a text message that goes out that says, hey ladies, can you, this is what I've done. And we're like, we're on it. When does the magazine come out? When does whatever? And we are promoting them on LinkedIn and on social media and on those things where it feels weird to promote yourself. But especially in business, you need to realize that the first thing is it's imposter syndrome. You need to know that if you have worked hard and you have the abilities and the qualifications, that you should apply for that job. And so knowing where the emotion lies, to cause the problem is the first step. Because if you know, you do better. Know better, do better.
That group of friends can be transformative. I have the same thing. And it's one thing that every time with Women Run, they're out there saying, hey, people, you guys gotta come to these things. They're here in the room, making sure that we have support. So, yeah, I would highly recommend that. So, book time. Yeah. Now, Amy's set up. Been watching her move furniture out there. So, thank you, Gina.
Yeah, thank you guys. Thank